welcome to First. I'm Nichelle Poston along with Mark Eichman and Shirley Min. If Delaware is now full of endless discoveries, do people know about them? An update this week on First.
Can Governor Markell have a secret email account that doesn't violate open government? First Person explores that issue with two people fighting to see what's written in those emails.
And we begin our journey this week on Route 13. It's a preview of the 100-mile monument, the road that T. Coleman DuPont built, and the impact it's made on how we see Delaware today. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
The catchy phrase, endless discoveries, may be paying off for the state that introduced itself as a place with just that. It's all a part of a campaign that kicked off in January to spark interest in travelers and draw them here to Delaware. In this week's First Look, we'll hear from Sussex County rental agencies where the summer season is looking good so far. It's just a matter of time when this boardwalk in Rehoboth, as all the others in Delaware, will be crowded with people from out of town. The hope for tourists to check out some of the state's endless discoveries.
You can come here, you can have a vacation, you can also have education for your kids.
Jack Lingo realtor Karen Falk says by the looks of beach rentals, the Delaware Tourism Office decision to reintroduce the state as a place with endless discoveries seemed to be paying off. The new campaign launched in January in a number of different markets.
I think that they did a really good job in reaching out to the people throughout the state, various chambers of commerces. We knew about the Endless Discoveries campaign and we saw the commercial. We even posted it onto our own social media. So I think they did a good job in telling us about it.
A voice that beckons to take time away.
The commercial targets mostly women. Why? Traditionally, women normally take the lead in deciding on a vacation destination, according to tourism officials. That targeted audience may be the reason Coldwell Banker realtors are seeing beach rentals fill up fast this year.
Doing very, very well. Last 2 weeks of July, first 2 weeks of August are your typical busiest weeks. Pretty well booked on those. So we're just kind of looking to fill the shoulder weeks on each side of that now, but doing very well. It's a good season.
Print advertisements have also been used in addition to the commercial to attract more vacationers both from neighboring states, the Northeast, and Point South.
Typically the favorite states I like to say that come are Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, but we have people come as far away as California, Ohio, New York, an increase in New York, from all over really.
Jack Lingo realtors report positive numbers possibly linked to the Endless Discoveries campaign as well. In fact, numbers are on the rise and slightly up from 2014.
We generally go up every year between 3 and 5%. So right now, we seem to be going up when it comes to our rentals, people calling in, getting ready for the season.
Every year, 7.3 million visitors make their way through Delaware. While the goal is to increase that number, one thing is certain: travelers have plenty of beach rentals to choose from downstate, and we got a sneak peek inside a few of the houses.
We handle over 500 rental properties, and most of those are weekly, but we have weekly, seasonal, year-round. A lot of our weekly owners, even seasonal owners, will go into wintertime.
Whether you're interested in beachfront properties or something more inland, realtors say beach rentals are very popular even during the off-season, thanks to the endless discoveries found in Delaware.
Some of my favorite endless discoveries, it's a well-kept secret, but the word's getting out that even our fall and winter seasons, it can be great here. Everywhere from nature to all the great award-winning festivals and events.
However, some admit the beach is sort of hard to steer away from, especially as the summer season fast approaches.
All three counties have some really great offerings when it comes to tourism. But one thing to keep in mind is that the beach is such a big draw.
As far as the response to the commercial and ads promoting the state, tourism officials say people have been enthusiastic. and excited to learn and see a side of Delaware they didn't know existed.
We're really happy that those images are going around this part of the country, Northeast and the Mideast area, to let people know that we're a great place to come visit year-round.
Some of you at home may have seen some of the print ads which are running in national print magazines such as Oprah, Good Housekeeping, and Southern Living. As far as the commercial, that can be seen on Comcast TV channels in East Coast markets such as Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Richmond.
And Michelle, I know that the commercials and the print ads have been running since January. Are there any other campaigns that are running now?
Yes, actually, the Delaware Tourism Office recently kicked off one in the mainline area, Philadelphia. The target is New Jersey vacationers. They're trying to get them to see that Delaware beaches are appealing as well. And what's unique about this campaign, they're actually wrapping cars in branded ads.
Okay, so is the effort paying off?
According to Linda Parkowski of DTO, yes, there are. They're definitely paying off. In fact, she says the most often of the comment that they hear most often is, "I did not know that's in Delaware." So it's paying off.
Well, we definitely need to change that. Okay, thank you so much, Nichelle. And great time for this kind of story, especially with the weather finally warming up. We'll have another follow-up later in the summer.
Coming up on First, we'll travel to Dover for a look inside the Biggs Museum. It tells the story of Delaware through its craftspeople. But to get there, you might want to ride down Route 13. A preview of the 100-mile monument later on First. Transparency is a big part of government, should be a big part of government. There's an issue brewing, though, in Governor Jack Markell's office over the use of a private email that forms the conversation for our First Person segment this week. Newark Democrat Representative John Kowalko is here, along with John Flaherty of the Delaware Coalition for Open Government. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. For those who haven't been following this, let's just kind of set the table of where the situation is. How did you find out that the governor has this sort of, not sort of, but a secret email, a pseudonym that he uses to get email?
It's actually a secret email address for a state account, which is where it becomes either unethical or illegal. Can be the context. I found that out because I had solicited a huge amount of FOIA, through FOIA emails about the Priority Schools Network. And as I went through hundreds and hundreds of pages of the FOIA requests, I noticed there was nothing from the governor personally. And at first I thought, well, maybe I'm missing something, but I couldn't find any emails, so I thought, well, he's either not in touch with this issue, but it's too important, he was on the steps of Warner, or somehow we're not getting all the information. And as I mulled over my next action on that, I noticed an article in the paper Jonathan Starkey wrote talking about a pseudonym the governor used. So it dawned on me that if I didn't have access to that pseudonym, I may be shuffling away on my FOIA request from that account itself. So the first thing I decided to do was let me find out what the pseudonym is. So I filed a FOIA request with John Flaherty, to divulge the pseudonym. And in the course of the response to that, after the 15 days, which is not mandatory to FOIA, but something we have to clean up because it's used sometimes to delay the answer. Instead of receiving an answer, here's the pseudonym that he uses, it was almost a convoluted letter from Andy Lipstone, his lawyer, that said, this is the worst kept secret in Delaware. They acknowledged they were using a pseudonym, but and they tried to justify why that shouldn't be made public. Well, that's just certainly contradicts the intentions of the FOIA and transparency.
What's the problem with the governor having a secret email that nobody else really knows about, B, with it being a pseudonym and not his actual name?
Well, other than the fact he's not allowed to have secret email accounts, and this is a state.de.us email account, the whole purpose of the open government law is to allow public officials, the media, to monitor the activities of our elected officials. And there are specific exemptions in the law for what's public and what's not, and there's nothing in there that allows this to be secret or non-public. So this is a public issue, and I'm hoping that the governor will eventually comply with this. I think he's been given bad legal advice. He's done a lot to help out with the open government over the years, and I think this issue here is an issue that he needs to just step up and come and comply with Representative Kowalko's letter.
We got a statement from the governor's office saying this is standard practice used by past Delaware governors to manage dozens or hundreds of email received from the public every day. They say it is no different than having a direct dial phone extension distinct from the main office number. What's your response to that response from the governor?
Well, my response to that is very simple. Even a direct dial phone, if there were a record kept of it, that would be foiable too, if it discussed government policies and if it was in an official capacity. So there is no exemption for you want to be discreet. If you're talking about or discussing government policies and issues, that's all foiable. The fact is that it's impractical to say that you would have some kind of a record of a phone conversation. So to FOIA that, you would just certainly get an answer that we don't have that available, and I can appreciate that. But in the age of emails, in the age of written correspondence, there is absolutely a requirement that when we're using official state email, and when we're using it to discuss any kind of policy issues or interagency dialogues, that's foiable.
This secondary email address, this secret email address, is foiable, though, correct?
Yes.
So the issue is that the public didn't know about its existence to issue or to submit a FOIA.
Very specific when you make FOIA requests. You can't go on fishing expeditions. But to the governor's point about the telephone calls, there is a presumption of privacy on telephone calls. There is not a presumption of privacy for public documents, and under state law, there are specific exemptions for specific documents, and there is no exemption for the governor's email account there.
Let me go back to the more from the governor's statement in response to all this. We talked about them being subject to FOIA, all of his email accounts, and he sort of calls out you, Representative Kowalko, saying that your emails are truly secret because the General Assembly, unlike the executive branch, exempts its emails from public record requests.
That's a petty response. I mean, John Kowalko has been a huge supporter of open government and transparency. He was not involved in the efforts to keep the secret email accounts of the General Assembly. That was from the leadership. So that's a cheap shot there. I don't particularly like that.
Should the General Assembly's emails be open as the governor's?
At the time that we passed the new FOIA bill, the extension of FOIA, I offered an amendment that our emails should be FOIable also. We could easily redact personal or constituent issues, personal issues that it should be. But as far as public policy, state policy, interagency dealings, I willingly give my FOIAs. I'll redact the confidentiality where it's necessary for the individuals that are outside the system that might email me. But if I have a request for an email about a dialogue I've had about policy issues, I will release that, because I don't agree with that decision that we made. That was an amendment that was put in, and at the time, the majority leader, I believe, Schwarzkopf, and I had a major disagreement. It was in the newspapers. I said we should have these open, and so I in a way, I get a little offended that the governor references that when he knows my history of not only having tried to change that, where it would be my emails would be foiable on issues of government, but also that I'm willing to give those emails if it's specifically requested, and I have those in my docket, because I think that it's only fair that the public understands how we reach the decision, and not because I expect the public to catch us doing something wrong. I think it builds confidence, but they realize there's a logic to it. It only helps us. It protects us.
And I imagine we have not heard the last of this issue. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. Very interesting conversation. Representative John Kowalko and John Flaherty of the Delaware Coalition for Open Government, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
This show can be found online at WHYY.org/first. Past shows are there as well. Our e-newsletter is out this week, and it's a good way to check out what WHYY is doing in Delaware.
Let's spend another minute or two talking about open government and the alternative email account during our State of Play segment. Stephanie Hansen, former Newcastle County president and now with the law firm of Young, Conaway, Stargate and Taylor, is here. And we also have Michael Stafford, attorney, columnist, and contributor to MSNBC, is here as well. So Stephanie, I want to start off with you first. What's the balance between privacy and open government in this case?
Well, I don't think that it's that it should be surprising to anyone that there are two email accounts, because you have one as a public official that you should be discussing public business in. There's another that you should have as a public official where it's a personal email account where you're back and forth with your wife about, do you need me to bring home bread today? Is Jimmy's soccer practice still going to be at 5? And for campaign information that goes back and forth, because you don't really want to mix the two. I think the problem is that we've heard is when you've got an account you're discussing public business, but yet it's not the state.de.gov or whatever it happens to be. I think the line is, if you're discussing public business, it needs to be accessible to the public. So there needs to be a way that information, if it finds its way onto an account that is not the public account that's FOIA-able in some way, you need to take that information and drag it into a folder where it can then be accessed by the public.
That's interesting.
But look, Stephanie, I mean, it's a state.de.us email account with not his name attached to it, but Alan Jackson or whatever. I could come up with better pseudonyms, pen names if I was governor. But regardless, it's a state.de.us email account, which means it's a public email account. Right. And anything that is subject to FOIA that's in that account is discoverable. I mean, citizens under our law can get access to it. So conceptually, I mean, it's not any different than jack.markell@state.de.us. I mean, I understand the logic behind having a separate account. I imagine that if you're governor or you're a high-ranking official, your email probably fills up with spam on a daily basis. You must get hundreds of emails from random citizens groups, people asking for favors. So I can see the need for a separate account that not everybody has, where high priority items go. That makes perfect sense. But to then argue that somehow, because it's a different account, it's not subject to FOIA or the contents are somehow more protected, that to me is probably not a line that you can hold.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I hope I didn't come
off
off sounding like that. I was saying that it wasn't FOIA-able. No, any time that you're discussing the public business, whether it's in your state.de.us gov account or a personal account. I mean, it goes so far as if this is in your personal account and it is and you're discussing the public's business, it needs to be something that the public has access to. And maybe where it comes down to is when someone sends in a Freedom of Information Act request, they want to have all documents related to the blank file, the name of the project. And then it's up to government to discover, to figure out, which is a morass, I suppose. Where is that information going to be? Is it all going to be just in our state email file? Is it now, do I have things in my personal file or in the pseudo state government file that are addressing that as well? Because that's all stuff that the public has a right to know.
Yeah.
Thin line for sure.
It is. I mean, that Stephanie's point, it is a morass. I think many of these laws, both the FOIA statutes, other records access statutes that apply to like schools like FERPA, a lot of this was designed in the pre-electronic record era. And it's not necessarily as well adapted to the realities of the world we live in today, where, in the past, the late 80s, the early 90s, what kind of documentation is going to be discoverable through a FOIA request? Formal correspondence, letters, reports, that sort of thing. Whereas now, you've got these email accounts with hundreds and hundreds of emails that have to be sifted through by people trying to generate a response.
And that's really the thing that I think most people don't understand. And we deal, as in the legal field, with document requests all the time.
Okay.
And so when you send in a request for documents, the paper documents themselves, that may be 10 or 20% of the actual documents that are involved. The other documents are all electronic. So you've got probably 70 to 80% of the material that's a document is in electronic form. And the ability to access that and get to it is tremendously costly and time intensive. And it comes down to then who's going to decide what the search terms are to get that particular information and then how to get it.
Always a pleasure to have you two on set. Stephanie Hansen,
Thank you.
Michael Safford. Hope to see you soon again next month.
On May 11th, we begin the first in a series of First Extra broadcasts that dig into life in Delaware. The first in this series is called the 100-Mile Monument, and Shirley is here with the preview.
Well, Mark, you know we've all traveled along 13 at some point, and it's tough to avoid when you're traveling between Wilmington and Dover. But that road really has shaped the state and the nation to a greater extent. There are a lot of quirky places along 13, and we tell the stories of a few of them. We also look at the history of the road, and that starts with T. Coleman DuPont.
In 1908, T. Coleman DuPont proposes this idea for a paved road that would connect northern and southern Delaware. He was reported to say, "I'll build a monument 100 miles high and lay it on the ground."
He was a real go-getter. Coleman funded it to the tune of $4 million, which is the equivalent of about $50 million today.
So who was this philanthropist with the big vision, big wallet, and the familiar last name? A giant, it turns out, even among the DuPonts.
Coleman was about 6'4", 220 pounds, so he was a big guy in stature. DuPont's given name is Thomas Coleman DuPont. He was known by many as Coleman and close friends and family as Coley.
T. Coleman DuPont was the great-grandson of E.I. DuPont, who was the founder of the DuPont Company.
He grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, apart from his cousins in Delaware, yet still fully enjoying the perks associated with the family name.
We think he goes to Europe around the time he was 19, probably on the grand tour and going to check out Europe and then come back and report home to the family.
It's believed his time in Italy and seeing the 200-foot wide grand boulevards may have planted the seed that would later become the MIT graduate's vision for the road.
Delaware in the United States was largely less developed than Europe transportation-wise, so I'm sure Coleman saw that if Europe had it, the United States should have it as well.
Coleman makes Delaware his home in 1902, when he and cousins Alfred and Pierre take control of the family biz. When Coleman pitches the idea to the state in 1908, most of Delaware hasn't even heard of a highway, let alone driven on one.
At the time, there's no networked highway system in the United States. There's no state highway department, there's no federal highway department. In fact, only 8% of roads in Delaware are paved or improved. If you've ever seen video reel or anything from that time period, traffic is a mess.
Around the same time, production on Ford's Model T is ramping up.
T. Coleman DuPont really had this vision of needing a highway and an infrastructure for the coming automobile age in which everyone would have a car, and he was right.
I think Coleman wanted to build the road because he knew it would spur economic growth.
He saw these rural, isolated farm communities in southern Delaware losing a lot of young people who were leaving to go elsewhere for other economic opportunities.
Does he get the road built the way he likes? Well, you're going to have to watch to find out. It took a lot of driving to finish the story, but it was a lot of fun.
It's really hard to believe that 20 years ago there was no Route 1 and 13 was your only choice to get south in Delaware.
Yeah, that was the main thoroughfare, and we get into the impact that 13 and Route 1 have made on places like St. George's. For example, did you know that Route 13 originally cut right through the heart of St. George's because that's where the original St. George's Bridge was until the early 1940s.
Interesting. Well, all of us in the newsroom know that one of the real reasons you wanted to do this was so you could stop at Helen's Sausage House just as many times as possible. But was there a story along 13 that kind of stood out for you as really memorable?
I think when all was said and done, some real standouts for me were, it was a tie between Mumford Sheet Metal Works and Captain Bones. But I think for our viewers at home, you'll just have to watch and then you can pick your own favorite.
That's what we call a tease. First Extra, the 100-Mile Monument, premieres May 11th, Monday night at 9 p.m. on WHYY-TV, and we're looking forward to it. Just off Route 13 in Dover is the Biggs Museum. And if you love antiques, art, or Delaware history, or any of the above, it's a must-see. The Biggs, as it's known, was created not only to house those items, but also to tell the story of Delaware through them. Here's First Experience.
Welcome to the Biggs Museum of American Art in historic downtown Dover. American art and the interpretation of American art is our #1 mission. We collect things made, used, and cherished in Delaware from about 1700 to the present. The museum really starts with the museum's founder, Sewell C. Biggs. He had been collecting here within the state of Delaware for about 60 years. Eventually, different entities from the state of Delaware invited Sewell to come bring his collection to put on view in what was 20 years ago a Delaware State Visitor Center. The museum became its own entity, and eventually the museum took over the entire building at 406 Federal Street, which is where we are today. We have a couple of really very important, very interesting collections. We have some of the earliest pieces of furniture that we've been able to find created by Delaware craftsmen. And that's with pieces of furniture that came out of the Vincent Lockerman house here in Dover, Delaware. Vincent Lockerman was a local merchant, bought the house in the early 1740s, and the furniture that we have here, a huge suite of it, was probably made here in Dover in that period of the 1740s. We have a lot of portraits because portraits were really popular right up through the 19th century. A lot of the portraits that are on view here actually were made in Delaware or are of people who are from Delaware. We have one of the best silver collections of Delaware silversmiths anywhere in the country, and most of it is on view and available to see at any time. Frank Schoonover, one of the key sort of students of Howard Pyle, created probably something like 3,000 illustrations. I mean, he was a rock star of the printing industry in the first part of the 20th century. And we have one of the largest collections in North America. The collection is on a timeline basis. So every gallery you go to is another 20 or 30 years up the timeline. So you can talk about the evolution of style, and you can also talk about the major historic influences that shaped the way things look. That timeline presentation is something that's very interesting, very special about this museum. We have all sorts of specialized tours within the museum, so you can talk about the history of portraiture, the history of furniture, the history of ceramics, the history of glass objects, and you can sort of see that evolution. I think that some of the most important things to remember about the museum, it's a really unique, focused collection around this region. You're really going to have this very intense, very personal, intimate sort of experience within the museum.
The museum has a number of ways for the public to get involved, from art classes and specialty tours to all kinds of events. You can find more information on their website, biggsmuseum.org.
Next week for our first experience, we'll be back at the Biggs to introduce you to the art of William D. White. History has nearly forgotten this Delaware artist, and the Biggs is working to keep his memory alive. It's a fascinating story. We also have a water check. What's the state of Delaware's waterways? We'll explore that next week on First.
Looking forward to that and more. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Mark Eichman and Shirley Min, I'm Nichelle Polston. Happy May. Have a great week.